Welcome to episode 407 of Get Paid for Your Pad. And today we are talking to Kim Herrlein. She's the founder of purveyorsleisure.com. It's a difficult word to pronounce for foreigners like myself, but I hope I did it correctly, which is a large, it's a short rental management company for large luxury homes in the Coachella Valley area. Is that correct, Kim?
That is correct. That's where we first got our start. And it's
Awesome.
Purveyors of Leisure.
Purveyors
And
of Leisure.
if you think it's hard to say, try spelling it for everyone on your email.
What does the word purveyor mean? I'm actually not 100% sure.
To provide, it's basically, to provide, to curate. It's kind of like a shopkeeper's word for English.
Yeah.
To purvey.
Awesome. Sweet. So we are going to talk about how to leverage your hosting business using virtual assistants. I know you are a big fan of incorporating virtual assistants in your business, and I know it's been a huge help for you. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit more about your hosting business and who you're catered to. I know there's some specific challenges and interesting things to point out when it comes to the homes that you manage.
Sure. We found early on that large group travel was increasing and focused more so on that particular avatar. And our homes are on larger properties, some are 1.5 to 2.5 acres and comprise of anywhere from 6 to 11 bedrooms. So we're really catering to a different guest. It's not a couple couples or just one family. It's typically a number of people coming together to celebrate something. It may be as simple as an 80th birthday, and it's multi-generational, to a wedding. In addition, we found that it worked great during the week for corporate offsite meetings and budget meetings and leadership retreats and wellness retreats. So we really have an interesting mix of guests that are interested in these properties. We primarily state that we're like a boutique hotel in a private resort. And that being said, most people don't want to leave. And I think by offering this high touch that I spoke to you earlier about this, from the moment they book until they leave, they are hosted. And what that means is, my virtual assistants handle the booking process and then hand over the baton to our hosts that are on the ground in each of the areas that we represent, and check in the group and are available from 9 to 9 to basically answer anything.
Yeah, that's a really interesting aspect of catering to these larger groups, because as you mentioned, there's always one person that organizes it. And I can totally relate to that, because I've organized a lot of travel, and I've booked a lot of Airbnbs on behalf of a group, because when I travel with a group, everyone's like, oh, well, you're the Airbnb expert, you should book the Airbnb, right? So then, yeah, it's an interesting process, because like you mentioned, it's like if you book like a 6-bedroom home for 10 people, like you already know that, how you're going to divvy up the rooms. Is everyone going to be happy? Like, what do different people want? And so you really feel responsible for the choice that you're making and all of that. So I can imagine that it's a different process when you're booking for like just yourself and your partner or something.
Absolutely. And we saw that early on as one of the ways that we could stand out. And it all sounded great until we became so busy that I was working crazy hours answering all sorts of questions, everything from, if Uncle Joe stays in bedroom number 7, how far is the bathroom? And so Uncle Joe and I know about Uncle Joe and his walker and so on and so forth. So, realizing that early on, that our, not only the response time, but our caring about the kind of pressure the main person experiences making this big financial decision, because these are not, inexpensive places. There's no, this is really a hotel experience. And people who come will never probably travel differently again, because they can basically bring in private chefs. We have massage therapists, yoga teachers, fitness instructors of all kinds, beauty treatments. I mean, I can bring in basically any of those services, and they once they have them, including staff, they're hooked, right? They're like, why would I ever go to a hotel and take up 6 rooms or 8 rooms and have to be with other people? And I think that's also a big part of it. It's the quality of the time that everyone's spending together and not having to go down to the restaurant to get a coffee, right?
Yeah.
Those kind of things, or just one drink or whatever it is. So we are really dealing with a unique group of guests. And although it was obvious that we needed to continue to do this hand holding, it was exhausting. And so this is where the virtual assistants piece comes in. I had been working both with my investor slash partner. We would just kind of tag team a lot of the time regarding inquiries and follow-ups. And naturally, as we were expanding, we were, and using other apps and tools, people were coming in from all directions. It was whether it was email from repeat guests or our website or our texting app. I mean, at some point, I just realized I could not possibly do a good job. That's really what it came down to. I felt guilty. I was waking up like, what did I forget? Every moment, having this doubt. And I think, truthfully, I mean, my hesitation with first hiring the virtual assistant was, will I have enough work? That was ridiculous, right? That's just a complete misnomer. Secondly, will I be organized enough to hand it over? And I have to say, I mean, it's one of the main reasons I joined Legends X. I mean, I needed a system for all of my systems. I had systems. They were not necessarily documented. They were all pretty much living in here. And I immediately saw the value in systematizing everything from guest communication, right? All the templating. Obviously, once you move from the booking process, kind of what we do next with the guest, offering those upselling those concierge services, and so on and so forth. And I was like primarily nervous, when I first interviewed my first assistant, but quickly after decided to have 2 at the same time because it was a lot of work to train, and I wanted to cover as many hours as possible. And in doing that, wow, you realize what you have been doing and what you had been capable of, and no wonder why you're so exhausted and actually fearing burnout is what was happening.
Yeah.
Because during COVID, I think for our industry specifically, we didn't see it coming from the point of view of now that travelers couldn't go to hotels, and because people are so cooped up and so tired of each other and needing kind of, the variety of that we're used to in day-to-day life, a short-term rental was a perfect escape, a perfect place to go and certainly be with loved ones and friends and family. So the coupling of all of that really pushed me over the edge. And I advise everyone not to wait until that edge. But I think the best news of all is once you have a virtual assistant, or I guess once you get over the hurdle that you have to have everything perfectly in place to hand over, once you allow that imperfection that does exist right now in your business, it exists and it's going to exist and you can't deny it. The best part about it is getting fresh eyes on the subject. You have somebody who is only, for instance, in one case, only doing guest communications. So guess what? We never miss a follow-up email. We never are confused. Where did that come from? I thought I saw a woman by this name, the kind of things that happen when you're busy and losing track. And at this point, I have 4 virtual assistants. And I think something what made me decide to continue down this path is that I was incredibly impressed with their language skills, both verbally, like being able to speak to clients, obviously their grammar in writing to the clients. So impressed. And I think that was also holding me back a little bit. Are they going to speak like me? Are the guests going to feel like they're, speaking to Purveyors of Leisure? And it turns out that you can curate that. You can, by showing them, I had all of them create a cheat sheet I had them study for basically 2 to 3 weeks before they answered anything. And they had to literally go through all of our various ways that guests communicate with us and see the recurring issues or recurring questions and come up with where that template lives to answer it. And it's pretty great that they all have their own cheat sheet, because like all of us, we all learn differently and we all access information differently. And I didn't feel the need to create. At first I did. At first I thought I had to create this for them. It turns out that we have all this information in all these places, and they could actually access it and create something that they could use as a resource, which turned out to be much more important than I realized. And now we're off to the races. I mean, my first VA is now managing all the other three. We are totally moving past kind of the, I guess the just regular, business of booking reservations, and we're moving well into marketing, outreach, social media campaigns. I mean, their breadth of knowledge is incredible. And again, I mean, Legends X giving me that playbook to be able to share with them and give the autonomy to my lead VA to really, I mean, when I send in Asana, update the system because she came up with a good idea. I mean, she feels like she hit the lottery, right? She came up with a good idea. Do you think we should do it this way? I'm like, great idea. Put it in the system. And now it's in the system. And that's how the other three VAs do that particular task. So to have those two, I have to admit, I do not think that I would be as successful using the VAs so quickly if it were not for the systems I learned in Legends X and primarily having that playbook.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I would love to touch on. There's a lot of amazing things that you mentioned. First of all, it sounds like you were kind of the prototype of a hectic host a while ago, like when you're talking about almost getting burned out and stuff.
I was, and yet at the same time, I mean, it's interesting because my revenue is very high. I mean, because of the nature of the stays and the nature of the homes. And so even though I've only at the height of my portfolio, I had nine properties. Right now I have 7, give or take, like one will drop off. I have 2 I'm remodeling right now and beyond pretty soon. But I think for me, what it turns out is that I really enjoy identifying the properties and doing the design work and managing those projects. But the rate at which I was also accumulating business, it was just the speed at which it was happening, and wanting to be able to manage both. It felt very close to a burnout type of situation for sure.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to touch on is you were actually, I believe you were the first person to be on the wait list for the Legends X class, actually.
I was kind of tracking you guys down. I was stalking you because
because
you had the other mastermind. That's right. Because I spoke with Eric, I want to say, I don't know, maybe 6-8 months prior to your launch. And I, fit certain categories as far as that, but he was really very honest with me and kind of said what he had in the works, and that this model would fit where I was and I'd get more out of it. And I was very happy to not, well, one, to not completely have nothing to go to, but I was anxiously awaiting being in this program. I'm a huge fan of getting help, both personally and professionally. And there's so many experts out there. And I think also there's really something that happens in a group setting that you cannot necessarily put your finger on, as much as I like to think of it. It's just like the brain dump concept, but it's like on fire. It's like everybody is involved. You have buy-in from everyone. People do care. And if you have something to share, and you feel comfortable, which everyone in my pod did, and since now in the alumni mastermind, you just feel so supported and not judged. Like there's days when I feel great, and there's days when I'm like, this is really hard.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think it's, I was definitely stalking you guys.
Yeah, because I remember when Eric told me, he said, hey, we have our first sign up for Legends X, and I was like, we haven't promoted it yet. He's like, no, I know, but we have somebody who signed up. And I was like, okay, well, it's another like 2 or 3 months before we start.
I
I
know.
was like, wow, that person's like really committed. That's awesome.
I am. And I think, I mean, I think, like I said, I love systems, but I realized, sometimes you're speaking in a vacuum to yourself. And I think that's a lot of what, this kind of group brings to the table is you have people at various stages, either ahead of you, behind you, and each person adds, or a lot of people, let's face it, most people didn't get into this business, like didn't say, when I grow up, I want to be a property manager. I think it came out of combination of things, either necessity, opportunity, and some of us had completely different other backgrounds as far as, other businesses.
Mhm.
And I think we can always share,
Yeah.
what our wins are with one another and encourage one another. And it's nice that this is very specific, and the focus, I think you did a really good job of, moving from that hectic host to rising star and giving people the opportunity to see it as that.
Mm.
And it's not
Yeah.
just you.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
what I thought was really cool too, a couple of days ago, one of the other students who's in the alumni program now posted in the Facebook group that he had onboarded a bunch of VAs, and he was saying that for the first time in a long time, he was able to turn off his phone and put it on do not disturb, and actually get sleep without worrying about that phone going off.
Absolutely. I know. And he had been in my pod, and they watched me go through it, because I think our group started in, was it mid-March or mid-April?
Yeah, in April, yeah.
Something like that. So I had just hired my first two. And so they, the group watched me kind of not know what to do and then feel more confident and so on and so forth. And to be able to share that and to see, and actually subsequently I've had Jenny reach out, and we had a long talk over the weekend. And that's exactly what I guess, I'm a big fan of, is that kind of group support, being able to share your experience, and even if it's hard, right, but still be able to come out on the other side. And yeah, I think it was Charlie that hired two VAs, and he got to rest. I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing. It's funny because I see people holding their phone all the time, and I don't relate to it as it being me, but I was that for 5 years. Like, I don't know how else, not 5, 4, I'd say, of it.
Yeah.
And you're not very present. It takes a lot of effort to like say, I'm not going to look at that.
Yeah, and let's go a little deeper on the virtual assistants, because I'm sure there's people listening now and they're thinking, wow, this sounds amazing, but what is a virtual assistant, right? So a virtual assistant, essentially, it's a remote worker, right? It's somebody who
Correct.
works for your company remotely, and that's why it's called a virtual assistant. But there's a reason why most virtual assistants, at least in the short-term rental space, are from the Philippines. And are yours from the Philippines as well?
Yes.
Yes. And it's interesting because, I was reading the post that Charlie did where he was just kind of blown away by their level of English, first of all. And, I'm a huge fan of the Philippines. I've traveled there, like, I think at least 15 times.
Oh, wow.
It's just an incredible country. And, it's not a lot of people know this, but English is one of the two national languages of the Philippines. So the Philippines is a bilingual country. They teach
Right.
English in school, and so everybody speaks English, and they teach Tagalog, which is their local language.
Right.
Now, it's also, I think the Philippines has over 3,000 islands, and I think there's a total of 150 languages that's being spoken on all these different islands. So it's a
Amazing.
huge country.
Yeah.
I think that it's a huge, it's amazing country, but so I've experienced firsthand that people speak very good English there, and that's the
Right.
reason why, right? In the short-term rental industry, obviously there's a lot of communication, right? So
A lot of communication.
yeah,
Yeah. Obviously, so I had used a certain agency, and I don't necessarily need to promote it, but what I liked about this particular agency is that they not only work with the potential virtual assistants and provide you with the interview process and placement and contracts and all of that, they also educate you as the employer how to best use, and gives you basically your own tech stack, if you will. Like, if you do all these things, you will have success with your virtual assistant. And it's true. And I feel that's another agency that I feel very supported by, because not only do they educate the employer on how to use the virtual assistant's abilities and how to focus, keep them focused, but it helps them because they're training them on there's every week there's 3 trainings that either the VA or myself can join. And it could be something like how to do a Facebook ad. So it's a very interesting twist on just the virtual agency that I chose is not only a finder, which a lot of them are, but I like to look at it as like it's an educational relationship with the agency and us. And I can ask them, like, I don't know how to do this. Is there a way you can help me with it? And can you potentially help explain it to the virtual assistant?
Yeah.
So they're very hands-on in that way. And yeah, it's been great.
That's awesome. Would you want to share the name of the
Sure,
business?
I would love to. I mean, it's primarily for real estate. The name of the company is Sphere Rocket Agency, or Sphere Rocket Virtual Assistants. And that's Sphere, SPHERE, Rocket. And it's, yeah, I've been basically recommending them to mostly my real estate friends. But, having spoken with them and recognizing that a lot of the same, what the virtual assistants would need to be able to do those tasks easily translated into the tasks that I needed them to do. And actually this is what's amazing. So I have not had time to do any outbound marketing. I've been fortunate enough that these properties speak for themselves. Obviously the OTAs, bring them on in. Our locations are pretty highly desirable to begin with. So that aspect was kind of a no problem. But as a result, I am really trying to move I've had so many guests, right? Like, so if you think about it, I have 7 properties right now. Average is 18 people at a property every stay. And I'm really only capturing that 1, 2, 3 guest names or contact information. So I'm going to look into more so into StayFi to be able to capture all those names, because from a marketing standpoint, it would be incredible. But also looking at implementing social media. I mean, they're in these beautiful homes. We have areas that can be easily turned into Instagrammable spots on the properties. All of these were great ideas that I had, right? Swirling around. Never could even imagine like touching it because I didn't have the time. And now I've, basically gave 2 of the women who work at nighttime our time, daytime their time, the keys, in the sense of, now you've been here for a couple of months, you're starting to see the cadence of where people are talking to us from. And I'd love for you to, now here's my Facebook page, here's my Instagram page, here's my LinkedIn page, like really loading them up on, and they're going to come back to me with a marketing plan. Like what, I said, I'd like to increase followers, but I also want to call to action. I want to get them into my funnel, basically, of how we can, we have, like on our new website, which is exciting. I have a new website. We use Avocado, which is a texting app, which is great because I can oversee, well, one, you can broadcast messages from an outbound marketing standpoint, but also because our host welcomes the guest, it's nice to be supervising. I can see every guest communication with every host. And then my VAs can also use it for outbound calls as well. And just the fact that like they're coming to me with taking some of the ideas that I gave them, like seeds, and coming up with a plan. So, I mean, all of a sudden someone who's interested in scaling my business is like 4-fold now.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's so much more than I could have ever expected, because it's not just answering inquiries. Now they're like, there's buy-in, and they love working. I think a key piece about the virtual assistant is it's just like anything else. You can't treat them like some taskmaster on the other side of the world. It's like you curate the team and you bring together ideas and you hold space once a week
Mhm.
or once every 2 weeks, whatever works for you, just like you would if the person worked in person, in your company. So I think
Yeah.
that's a key piece. And I listened to my head VA tell the other two newer ones that being hired by Purveyors of Leisure and choosing to work with us was the best decision she's ever made in her life. And I'm like, of course, like had tears. But that's the kind of impact, because at first I think some people question the dollar amount. As most know, it's a much less dollar per hour amount than any of us are accustomed to in the States. At the same time, to highlight it is still a lot of money actually over there, how it's relative. And I think that I had to get over that too. I think there was a part of me that was like, well, one, what is the quality of the work of somebody who's getting paid $4 an hour? Once I got over that hurdle, it was then, am I taking advantage of something?
Yeah.
And I think I've heard that from other people in different industries feel that. And I think that it has helped me to recognize that it's relative, and listening, I don't have to I've heard from them how happy they are to be working for this
Yeah.
company.
Yeah, and that brings me to common misperceptions about virtual assistants. So number one is they don't speak English. Well, they do. If they're from the Philippines, then they definitely do. Misconception number two is they can't perform like more like complicated tasks. They can only perform the super easy task. Not true. A lot of people that are a virtual assistant, and you mentioned like $4 an hour, like I imagine it's probably around 500 a month or so.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of virtual assistants in the Philippines are actually very educated, and they tend to be quite tech savvy. They tend to be very sharp with social media, because social media is something that people in the Philippines use a lot, right? So as misconception number two is you can actually, and that's the same thing that Charlie mentioned. He was like, oh, I'm kind of blown away by how what they can do. They do a lot more than just like using a script to answer some messages and stuff.
Oh no, it's yeah.
And then misconception number three, like you said, it's like, well, if you're only paying somebody $500 a month, that's not a living wage, and you're taking advantage and all that. That's a huge misconception too, and I've seen that firsthand, because I know how much people are making. And I also know, I mean, the salaries, people have to understand, salaries are relative to living expenses, right? I remember one time I was in the Philippines, and there was a big party on the boulevard. There was a festival going on, and I was just walking there with a friend of mine, and we walked up to this little makeshift bar to order a drink, and we wanted to get I think it was a rum Coke is what we wanted to order. And so I tell the person behind the bar, I said, okay, can we have can I have 2 rum Cokes, right? And she put a bottle on the table, a bottle of rum on the table, like a 375 ml. So that's like, how much is what do you guys use in the US? Ounces? Is it ounces?
Yeah.
Fluid ounces?
Or milliliters, I guess. 750
yeah, so I think
milliliter.
375. I think that's something like 16 ounces or something. Does that sound correct?
And, yeah, maybe. I'm not good at metrics.
It's kind of like, it's a smaller bottle, right? But it's still like still a lot. It's a lot still, right? It's a lot.
Right.
And so I told her like, hey, listen, like I just want 2 drinks, like 2 glasses.
In a glass.
2 glasses, please. And she turns around and she puts 2 empty glasses on the table, right? And a can of Coke. And I was like, okay, so I don't actually want to buy an entire bottle of rum. And I just want to buy like two
Mixed
glasses
drinks.
with, a shot of rum, and
right.
the can of Coke is fine. And then she looked at me and she was like, I don't have that. And I was like, wait, so the minimum amount of booze that I can buy at this bar is a half a bottle. Like literally like that would be enough for the entire night. And
Right.
she looks at me and she goes like, yeah. I was like, all right, well, how much is the bottle?
Right. It's relative. I think
And I
that's
remember
key.
it to this day, it was 60 pesos, which is about $1.
Wow.
That's about a
Okay, so
dollar. And
that
this is,
that right there. And I
yeah, this
had
is
to do
locally
that
grown.
too. I had to look up just, I think one of the prices that helped me like put this in perspective is that health insurance for an individual is $2 a month.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
exactly. So
and then I was like, oh, okay. Like it jostled I was like, okay, I feel a
yeah.
little bit better about that.
No, 100%. I
Yeah.
remember looking at rooms for rent, and it was like $50 a month, to rent a room. I mean,
Right.
you put this stuff in perspective. I'm like, well, I mean, where I'm from, people spent a third of their salary on
Right.
their accommodation, and people spent like $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a month. So if you just calculate all of that, like, I mean, I could live off $500 a month in the Philippines. I can guarantee you, I could do it.
That's what
I
I've
can rent a
heard.
small
Yeah.
a small apartment for like $100. I
Right.
mean, food is just so cheap that that's not really a big expense. So yeah, just that's a third
Yeah, I think it's
misconception,
important
right?
though for people hesitating potentially for that. It did cross my mind, and I definitely, felt better knowing more about it. And I think, like I said, just witnessing firsthand how excited they are to work with me. I mean,
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
really beautiful to see how
Yeah.
happy they are.
Plus, I'll say another big advantage for them to work with foreign companies is that in a lot of places in the Philippines, the infrastructure is not great, which
Mm,
means that if people have a normal, quote unquote, normal job, they typically spend like an hour or even longer sitting in a bus, in a really packed bus. There's a lot
right.
of traffic, especially in the bigger cities, a lot of traffic.
Mhm.
So they end up spending a lot of time like commuting to and from work, versus working for a remote company is perfect, because then you can work from home.
Right.
So it's a that's why the Filipino VA is typically, yeah, they love work, they love the work that they're doing, because it's for them it's a pretty good opportunity.
And I think also culturally, it's so common. I mean, they constantly refer to other people, what they're doing, whether it's in their family or extended, friend group. What I also realized is they are more accustomed to working in call centers. And I think just comparing the two concepts, right? Call center, you have this script, and most people don't want to talk to you. And I mean, it's probably not for all people. That's not to say that that's true of every single industry. But in comparison, you're being given this opportunity. Yes, there's absolutely redundancy. And, I'm sure parts when you're just sick of saying the same thing about early check-in fees or whatever it is. On the other hand, there's so much more autonomy, and looking at being open to letting them bring to me something to benefit the company. And yeah, it just feels really good. And all my people on the ground, basically, we use Slack as a internal communication tool, and it's amazing. I mean, that everyone's talking to each other and happy birthday. It feels like all of a sudden, even though it's been a real company, it all of a sudden feels like a real company, because I have 4 hosts, and I have an integrator, and I have 4 VAs, and all of a sudden we're like all doing this thing together, and it feels great.
Yeah, sounds awesome. Sounds awesome.
Yeah,
Congratulations on your success. And
thank you.
so my last question is, like, because the person that I learned a lot from regarding virtual assistants, and I've worked with virtual assistants for a decade pretty much, but there's a person in our mastermind, Rebecca Slivka. She runs a hotel out of Joshua Tree, Hicksville
Mhm.
Trailer Park, Hicksville Trailer Palace, sorry.
That's right near
She
us, Joshua
What's that?
Tree. Joshua Tree is really close to where I am, so I maybe
Yeah.
try to hook up with her. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Check it out sometime if you have time. But Rebecca actually, she worked with us on the virtual assistant training in Legends X, right?
Right.
And she she at some point had over 100 units in Los Angeles, and she had a team of 7 VAs that literally did 95% of the work. And just like you were saying, there was one of the VAs was like the head VA who was, delegating tasks to the other ones. And it was awesome. And one thing that I really loved about her story is that she actually went with her business partner, Erica. They actually went to the Philippines to visit their VAs and actually spend time with them and getting to know them, and I thought that was really awesome. My
Yes,
question to
it's
you
on
is
my list for
when are you
sure.
coding?
I know, it's totally on my bucket list. It was funny. I just had a need to know like where they lived. I knew, their addresses based on, because I send them money to their banks, and I had to have their addresses. And so then I started Google Earthing, using Google Maps and looking at like understanding like this one's in a mountain town, this one is in a more city, this one's on the water. Like it was so neat. I could, as you know, with Google Earth, you can go in and walk down their street. And I told them I did that. And I was like, I just wanted to like, I'm like, I feel like you see where I live because of these homes. And I'm always, on Zoom, talking from one of the properties, or, especially with newer ones coming on board. And they get to see where I am. And so it was really cool to just, I'm like, we're coming, right? So I'm not sure when, but hopefully
Yeah.
soon. I haven't done any international travel, but
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I mean, if you want to find yourself literally on an isolated beach, beautiful beach with beautiful clear waters
I'm
and palm
in.
trees, and there's nobody
Definitely
else there, then the
sounds
Philippines is for
awesome.
you. By the way, just out of curiosity, like where in the Philippines are your VAs based? Do you
Oh
know off the top of
gosh.
your head, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't even be able to give it the names justice. Manila was, well, one VA lives in Manila, and then a place about an hour inland from there. Then one that's in the mountain area region. It's still in the mainland though. It's not on the islands. Everyone's on the main, I guess what I would call the mainland. I don't know. Yeah, I don't remember them offhand.
Mhm.
But it's been interesting too, because we have these homes that are obviously palatial in comparison to most of the living situations I've at least seen, looking at the Philippines. And I think at first and I kept explaining to them like, look, there's a lot of nuances, occupancy and bedroom count and the types of beds, and people are going to ask all these questions. And I was like, just take your time, because I realized how foreign it must be, right, to in essence sell the experience when you've never been, and giving them videos to kind of feel like when they're walking through the properties, to have a sense of ownership over what they're selling in essence. I think that was, that is important. And just I love that I can touch base with them and check in and say, are you feeling supported? Do you, a lot of times, I mean, they're so honest. I think that's another thing that we should really discuss. I overpaid 2 of them at the beginning of their time with me, and I was just moving too quick and not doing math. And both immediately slacked me and said, you've overpaid me, Miss Kim. And obviously we fixed it, whatever. But it was just, I think that might be another misperception, that someone's so far away, you can't, how do you trust them? Or and then I'm getting, I think it's good for people to know this, because you are giving them lots of logins and passwords and access. I mean, they're in my credit card processor, whatever, all the things that we would all imagine we would do if you had a virtual assistant, to be able to take over the reservation piece.
100%.
So,
Awesome. Well, we could talk for
I
hours on
know.
this topic. I feel like, but we have to wrap it up. So before I let you go, let the listeners know where they can find your properties, and if are you still taking on new properties if someone has a house that they're looking to
Yes.
rent out?
Well, now we're ready. I mean, I honestly, Legends X program and my playbook and having 4 virtual assistants, I have this energized, I'm refreshed. And so yes, it's www.purveyorsofleisure.com. Really hard to spell. PURVEYORSOFLEISURE. I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to get through it. Keep spelling this name. But anyway, it does stick with people because it's unusual. We are primarily in the greater Palm Springs area in California, but we have recently, I'd say about a year or so, expanded to Lake Havasu City, Arizona, and much more recently, Borrego Springs, California, and Pine Valley, California, which is very unique areas. And it's basically Southern California.
And I love your logo. Is that a purple, no, a pink flamingo?
It's a pink flamingo and a martini, yes.
That's so funny.
We're about leisure, and I think that is very clear. Our tagline is we take leisure seriously, so you don't have to.
I love that. I love that. That's so fun. Awesome. Well, we'll have all the link. You mentioned a number of things that you mentioned the company that you use to find your VAs. We typically recommend Virtual Staff Finder, but sounds like this company is doing a great job. So definitely want to mention that again. Sphere Rocket
virtual assistants.
Yeah, SphereRocketVA.com. We'll have and you mentioned some other stuff, and I didn't have a chance to ask you about it, but you mentioned a texting app called Avocado or something.
Yes.
Is it Avocado?
I don't know if it's Avocado or Avocado. I mean, the name really rubs me the wrong way, but it's a great app.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to put all these links in the show notes that people will be able to find at getpaidforyourpet.com, of course. So if you want to check out any of these resources, go ahead and check out the show notes on getpaidforyourpet.com. And if you want to stay in the area of Coachella Valley, Palm Springs, check out Purveyors of Leisure.com. And I Googled it, I misspelled it, it still popped up. So if I can find it, I'm sure everybody else can find it too.
It's unique. Thank you so much, Jasper.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to be on the show. I'm sure everybody loved this episode because lots of value, lots of cool stuff in there.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And for the listeners, thank you for listening or watching. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening, we're on all these different platforms, by the way. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, iPad, Apple Podcasts. Like, I don't even know the names of all the different platforms, but we have a host that auto distributes. We have a system. So it auto distributes all these different places. So wherever you want to find us, you'll be able to find us. And last but not least, if you are enjoying this podcast, then what I would love for you to do is leave me a quick review, specifically if you're listening on Apple Podcast, because I've recently learned that it's really, really important for if we want to get more people to listen to the podcast, getting those reviews is super, super helpful. So if you've been listening for a while and you find podcasts helpful, please go to the Apple Podcast and leave us a quick review. And thank you for your support. With that said, thank you, Kim. Thanks everybody else, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.